Good morning or good afternoon. I don't know, maybe good evening in some parts of the world. Hi,
True.
Cheryl.
Good morning and good afternoon, especially in Romania. It should be afternoon by now.
Yes, and welcome back to our conversation, our monthly conversation about sleep and sleep awareness. We are continuing to, journey through the book of our Matthew Walker, the book of Why We Sleep.
Definitely.
And we are covering, we are covering part four, and our original plan was to have in
Maximum of
one
four.
go, but actually when we got to it we were like there's too much information to cover in 1 hour, so we're going to have a part four one, and today we're going to focus about sleep stoppers and sleep disorders. And
Correct.
next time there's going to be a part 4b, which kind of is going to talk about sleeping pills versus therapy, and also sleep and society to all of the level. So some of you who might want to, like, they're working in organization because it's coaching and mentoring, that will be an interesting one as well,
Mhm.
because we know it's a problem that it's affecting, and it's actually not really that much covered,
Yeah,
but
and it's
yeah.
also the modern times that we live in currently that are actually robbing us from our sleep, and yeah, we will be going into that just now.
Yeah,
Um,
so we're kind
the
of coming to
stoppers.
present more
Yeah.
and more with the part B next time, in June. And then we're finishing our journey right before the summer. This
Oh, at
journey,
least the journey with Matthew.
the journey with Matthew Walker, indeed.
True.
So maybe it's good to mention that we had the book, but also our conversation had other
Mhm.
parts, and then it's like this thing called sleep, and then it was why should you sleep, and then it was about how and why we dream.
Mhm.
And if you want to see all of those things, I think we've included the links in the text.
Correct.
You can also find us on YouTube. So, yes, do go back, do look. There's quite a lot of information, but
Yeah. And
we
of
have a
course,
lot of,
if you have
yes.
any questions still from previous episodes, or perhaps during this one or after this episode, do not hesitate to let us know what's on your mind, and we'll see how we can, yeah, answer that as best as possible.
Of course. And as usual, if anyone is watching us live, and I see Vlad is with us. Hi,
Mhm.
Vlad.
Hi there.
Uh, during the summer, no one sleep. Well, we actually hope that they will. But whoever is watching us live, please drop your question, comments, because it's
Sure.
always making us, more interactive
Mhm.
when we know that you are there and maybe you have questions, and we'll do our best to address it. And if not, we'll come back to it after the session. You have, whether you're watching us from Facebook or LinkedIn, you have the comments box, and feel free to drop a note there.
Indeed.
Now, that
Perfect.
being said, let's just jump into it. And although we did put in the promo, Cheryl, we put first sleep disorders and then sleep
Stopper.
stoppers. Actually, when we met yesterday in preparation for this conversation, we kind of figure out that maybe it's better to do it the other way around. So,
Correct. Yeah.
right. And why did we decide that?
Well, one reason was because the sleep stoppers are things that most people experience or might be challenged with. And knowing where that comes from and how that impacts us, I think is a very nice way to start this conversation with some information, some facts, but also, yeah, just factors that we all deal with on a daily basis. Whereas with the disorders, um, of course, not everybody will be suffering from that, but it's good to know that if you or someone else might have symptoms corresponding with whatever we mention for these, that it's definitely a great as a signaling function, and to make sure to do something about it or to seek medical help. Yeah,
I'm wondering if you're hearing the truck that just passed by.
I didn't.
That's good.
I did hear a dog on this end.
Yes, good. Just
Okay.
checking.
Yeah.
And very important indeed what you said there. And I think this was the reason to start with the sleep stoppers, because the intention of this series and of this conversation is one of raising awareness, right? Because information is power. It's truly power. It is to bring some things you might know, but some things not, and it is just to bring to your attention, to your reflection, certain
Mhm.
aspects, for because there's a lot of things that we can do to manage our own health, right? So when we have this knowledge, it's not only right to outsource it, to outsource the responsibility to a specialist, but
Mhm.
rather it is to take accountability for our own health, right?
Our own lives, our own health, indeed.
Exactly. And by all means, these are not, it's not intended as medical advice. Neither
Not
of us are doctors or anything. We do not pretend that we're specialists.
no,
We are, though, two people that deeply care for
indeed.
the well-being, right, of our own well-being, our families, but everyone else. Yeah. So this is
Indeed,
the
and also to
intention.
empower each other, right? To start the conversation, to discuss these topics that are, that we deal with on a daily, nightly basis, and to make sure we're not alone in this. We're all experiencing these challenges and these complexities that come with it.
Right. And before we deep dive into the sleep stoppers, because we're 7 minutes into the conversation, I saw a message from Madalena
Okay.
saying she was asking about the sleep quality assessment, if you could share some information about that. And I think with that, we'll see if we manage to fit it
Time.
in. But
And
if
otherwise, I can
not,
always, beyond this conversation, I can always contact her and see what she would like to know. Sure. But
yes.
thanks for mentioning that.
Of course, and also Madalena, Cheryl can also drop the email, her email, and you can reach out and you can have a conversation with her directly or via email, and I'm certain she will be more than happy to support you.
Exactly.
Now, sleep stoppers. Where do we start?
Well, we start with how um, not even 100 years. Well, before 150 years ago, we used to live originally in trees, actually, then to caves. We were adapting to the weather, to the temperatures outside, going about our day activities depending on when the sun would rise and the sun would set. And it was, I don't know my history numbers too well, but at some point industrialization arrived, and uh, the way we work and live dramatically changed, and therefore also changing uh, the quality and quantity of our sleep. So, if you can think of your circadian rhythm, the natural biological clock, your 24-hour rhythm, so to say, being in tune with the sun outside, the temperatures, and you having your natural rhythm because of that. And now with the industrialization, artificial lighting coming about, um, a greater workforce needed at a certain time in factories, hence people needing to wake up much earlier than naturally would be would be in sync with their system. Um, that had a lot of effects on the way our sleep rhythm actually started to change and become more towards getting deprived as such. So there's multiple sleep stoppers that actually um, came into place. One that I already mentioned being lighting, and especially artificial lighting. Um, Before we used to have only the sun as our source of energy to give us visibility. Then came fire, candles to help us extend the space that we could be doing stuff. And since the LED lighting came, artificial lighting as a general whole.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it was the
yeah,
discovery electricity and then the
electricity,
bulbs and all of those things. At first
exactly.
it was with gas. I think we had gas, we had oil,
Correct.
that we had public illumination, but then with the electricity, I
We are
think that
basically now we
changed.
could be working, doing our activities 24/7. And that has had a major impact on just the way we actually live and go about everything. Um, One thing that was mentioned is with regards to a research on how reading a book in the evening is compared with reading a book from an iPad, having the blue light coming from that, and how that actually has an influence on the release of melatonin, which is
Hmm.
needed to induce sleep. They found out that it actually the one the people that were reading on the iPad actually had a 50% reduction of the melatonin being released and an extension of when it also was being released. So you had, and it was less, and also at a much later um, time in the evening. But one thing that I would like to note on this is that it not only is blue light that can really give that effect of the signal going through your brain, as in I'm getting light, it's actually still day, meaning that your body, your brain are just not then getting unwound in order to be setting that stage for sleeping. But it's also what we actually do on the on the laptop, the iPad, the TV. Could be social media, scrolling, fear of missing out on messages, the alertness that comes with that. So it's always multiple factors that could be playing a role with um, how quickly you are then feeling like wanting and being able to sleep. But also, we have this time frame where we are actually going to sleep even later than we used to. Yeah.
Right. And yesterday, what it came indeed when we were talking, because we were reflecting together on
Yeah.
industrialization. And I was like, so, well, let's take a moment and think
Yeah.
how in the past people were kind of sleeping because, or what were the conditions? Because
Hmm.
in the night, you wouldn't travel, right? And
Exactly.
it was only that the richer people were affording to have candles. Those were very expensive, right?
Indeed.
Therefore, let's say an average family, or most likely, they were
Hmm.
bound to the rhythm of nature because, yeah, otherwise they wouldn't see.
Exactly.
And also, the animals that were living out of, were taken care of, they were
Yeah.
also bound by nature. Everything was
Correct.
bound by nature, right? So you wouldn't necessarily go out there, in the forest or stuff like that, because there were
Yeah.
other animals that were also bound by nature but awake and alert. And so you would be fearful. You would also be
Hmm.
fearful to travel from one place to another at night, whether it was by horse or in a carriage, because there would also be people that might be having not the best of intentions, so then you would be in
Yeah.
danger. So
Yeah.
therefore there was a very, very clear relationship, and everybody a clear relationship with the sun and the moon and nature. And the thing is, everybody was listening to their own bodies, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, and also through the season, if you think about it, also like that, because throughout the seasons they would go, and if the light was less, they would
Mm-hmm.
go earlier to bed,
Yeah.
or they would do the activities that they could do around the fire in a house, but that's it, right?
Yeah.
If we add to that the fact that how they were preoccupied, and the fact that, well, I mean, of course, until writing was invented, but let's look
Mm-hmm.
at 1700s. Also, people didn't necessarily have book access. There was much more community gathering. Everybody had,
Talking
like, you
with each
didn't
other, sharing
talking to
stories.
each other in the community, because
Yeah.
there weren't phones and other stuff, and people could not afford big houses or owning land or anything, so everybody got crowded. Therefore this was did wonderful for the serotonin of the brain, because we have the chemicals,
Yeah.
good
And not
chemicals in the brain, which are selfless, right? So it is the
exactly. And
serotonin
feeling
and
like a
oxytocin.
community, feeling
Yes.
seen because of that, and not alone. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So all of those things were playing to our good part of the. Yes, of course, we can talk about, and let's not run on a, how it was with, okay, antibiotics were not discovered and other things. But the thing is that when we look at sleep, pretty much everyone was in sync with their own body. Yeah. So
And we didn't
and
have factors affecting it in a superficial way. Yeah.
right. So there was not that much need. Nobody really expected you to come to do something that was outside of a
Exactly.
rhythm. And then with industrialization and with the electricity and all of it,
Yeah.
we started into, okay, we want to have factories. Now, when we want to have factories, it was like, how can we produce more? How can we do this? We need to get people to be at a certain time in one
Time.
place, because if you have like 50 people, or and everybody kind of needs to be in sync, and then what do we
But
do? How do we wake them
exactly.
up?
And that is a nice bridge to actually, what is it called? The old day clock, so to say, and the punching of the time cards, because they had to have a large workforce be starting, let's say, the first shift at an early time, and to have them all be there at the same time. So you had this factory whistle, which would artificially wake up people before they would maybe naturally would want to wake up. And that's how, indeed, coming from a noise perspective, and from not being able to fully continue your own rhythm, having that negative impact as such. And that is kind of now being compared to our modern day alarm clock, in which we have to indeed wake up at a certain time in order to be able to start work or bring our kids to school, and start our day. Yeah.
Well, it can also be for positive things, like, for instance, you want to have your time and you want to go to the gym or run or do all of those things. Never
Indeed.
mind, fine, but it isn't. It is about, so setting aside how many hours you sleep, because you might have started at 10
Correct.
and you set your alarm clock at 5, and there is a club 5 a.m.
Really?
It's called,
Yeah.
for people that are focusing on productivity and all of those things. When you look at the strictly sense of what it is happening with the relationship with sleep,
Yeah.
and maybe with the connection, am I a sleep owl or am I a
Or
morning
a
lark?
lark.
Yes,
Correct.
am I going against my own rhythm, my
Indeed.
circadian rhythm, just because
Yeah.
I want to achieve something? That's one thing. And the other thing was the disruption that the alarm. So, what is happening when you have the alarm?
It
You know,
actually, it actually gets you get a spike in your blood pressure when you hear the alarm. And second, you get this, it's almost, maybe I'm exaggerating it a little bit, but it's kind of like you get this blow to your cardiovascular function, since indeed this spike is happening. And
it's like you get scared pretty much. It's like somebody, it's actually pulling you out of the
exactly.
water, so to speak, you know?
Exactly, and especially if
Yeah.
you then also press the snooze button multiple times, can you imagine what kind of infliction or assault you're actually doing to your nervous system every time you hit that? And looking at that during a span of time, what this does to your whole system internally. Correct. Yeah.
Therefore, I think it's not advisable to have a snoozer. It's rather preferred
Yeah.
because you would fall back into maybe sleep in a short shape of sleep,
Indeed.
and then coming back, you do this repeatedly, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, I wouldn't say that you know, like when you do some electric shock to your heart, but in a way, you
Correct.
do that, you know.
Similar. It is similar. Correct. And the thing is, if you indeed, it is better to have your alarm clock, of course, to have a consistent time to wake up. But of course, it's the nicest to be able to wake up right before, so you don't have to um, go through that whole physical experience of what we had just explained. So,
And
yeah.
when you're saying that, it's actually, I want to invite people that are watching us live
Hmm.
or later on to really give it a try for a week, 10 days, and
Hmm.
set up an intention before you go to sleep. Tell to your mind, tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 7:20 or at 6:45 or
Hmm.
something, and then observe what is happening without an alarm. Of course, you can set up an alarm if you need to. Of course, don't count only on your
Hmm.
body, but just get committed. Tell your brain, tell your body that tomorrow you need to wake up. Of course, don't get 3 hours of sleep, so don't put yourself with, give yourself at least of a span of a 7 hours, and
Hmm.
observe what's happening, because I've tried it before, but this week I've tried it with my son as well, and he actually manages, and he is definitely a night owl that is postponing his time to go to bed, and in the morning he likes to take his time. But actually, he managed this week to wake up at 7:15, which surprised me. But we
Hmm.
said, so he said, Robert, what time do you want to wake up tomorrow? I want to wake up at 7:15. And he was saying,
Okay.
Mom, I'm awake at 7:15. And he doesn't have an alarm clock. And
And
it
what time would he normally wake up?
7:30, and it would be, Robert, wake up, and other things, all the gentleness in the world in the mom's heart. But he actually
Yeah.
succeeded to do that. And I if this is working, a collaboration with your brain, and and setting an intention might work better for your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
And
something to
and
try.
especially if you also look at, the sleep cycles that we go through, if you know a bit of how long your sleep cycle on average is, you can actually calculate to be waking up around the end of such a sleep cycle, and you'll be feeling much more well rested than if you would actually be waking up, for example, in the middle of such one. Yeah.
Yes,
It,
and then I would also like to talk because about the influence of regularized temperature, right? So with the industrialization and all of it, of course, we had more light
yeah.
and we were able to do more things, but we also had a mean to control more because we've
Correct.
built differently, and we got more aware, and then we got to control more the temperature of the
Indeed.
environment that we are. And I would like you to tell me a little bit more, because
Hmm.
especially because I know, culturally speaking, in Romania, there is a tendency sometimes to be in
Hmm.
an environment that it can be perceived, for instance, even from this culture where I am, or this
Yeah.
country here in Netherlands, as an overheated space. And then what does that play it, or what is the relationship of temperature with sleep?
And you mean overheated space as in using your
Well, like
radiator?
let's, yes, like over the winter, obviously not now, it's getting warm and everything, but over the winter, there is a tendency to have 23, 24, 25 degrees, and I doubt that over the night is. I've been, there is no judgment there, but this is just
Mhm.
the habit that people like to feel
Correct.
comfortable and all of
Yeah.
this. But in doing that,
Mhm.
what is the relationship with the sleep?
Well, and I would say, during the day, I don't see too many difficulties with that, except in my own experience, if I've had the heater on a too high temperature, that I would be noticing much drier skin, drier eyes, a drier throat because of the drier air that you actually then have in your house. So then the ventilation comes to place, as in how well aired is the air in your house. But going towards sleep, one thing that your body needs in order to get into that induced sleep state, or helping to induce that, is that your core body temperature drops by about 1 degree Celsius. And if we then keep our room house temperatures at this constant number, it will make it a bit harder to have your body, of course, be adapting in such a way that this state will be reached. So what what I've learned so far is that on average, a temperature around 18 is nice for about most people to be able to fall asleep. But really look at it with your own experience, what you find comfortable or not. Women tend to want it to be a bit higher, men tend to want it a little bit lower. You can also experiment with that. There is one thing where it does become a bit more of a challenge, is when you sleep with your partner in the bedroom and the one wants it a bit colder than the other. One thing that you could do is have two separate duvets. Duvets, one being a bit thicker for the one and a bit, thinner for the other. Looking at your pajamas, the clothing in which you sleep. How comfortable is your bedding? Some materials are more prone to isolate or insulate the heat, and others are more breathable. So those are things that you can definitely look into. And another nice example is, um, some of us love to have a hot shower or a hot bath before going to sleep. And a lot of people think it's because of the heat that we then become sleepy. But interestingly enough, it actually does a bit the opposite, or it's the opposite that you can look at, which is that um, when you have this hot bath, the the blood goes to the surface of your skin, and when you then get out of the bath or out of your shower, it's the dilated vessels that help to get the heat um, out of your skin, out of your system. And this actually then helps to kind of plummet your core temperature, which then makes it much easier to feel sleepy. Yeah. But
All
one thing
right.
is, one thing that I would advise, not to do it directly before going to sleep, but at least say one and a half hour before, because it does take a bit of time to get there. Yeah.
And when you mentioned about the separate duvet, it reminded me of
Mhm.
post that I think Vlad
Oh, that
might
we
share.
responded to, you mean?
Yeah, the one that how is it sleeping in different beds,
Oh,
impacting the
exactly.
relationship. And I have to say, well, we about 3 years ago we looked at changing the bed, and we did buy a different bed and went on a journey for months to look what is the right bed and the right mattress. Oh, it's a trip in itself to find out what's working for you, but also to educate yourself about different type of mattresses, as you say,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
this is when I looked at, because my husband tend to be I think over the night he has a very intense metabolism, so his heat goes much more up, while
Hmm.
mine it's going down. So we have all of this. So I said, looking at the needs of each other,
Hmm.
what do we need, and we ended up
Indeed.
buying mattresses that really, and also the support for the mattress, they're
Correct.
different, and they can
Mhm.
support the ventilation or not.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
ended up buying something that is supporting ventilation, and mattresses that kind of fit for each of us weight. And so
Correct.
there's two separate beds, actually, that there are one next to each other.
But it's not
But
separate beds, but separate mattresses, right? Making the bed.
no, they're actually separate frames,
Oh,
because we have
really? Oh,
electrical also to be able to adjust position, so that if you want each of us to have control of our own needs, so
mhm.
then that
Perfect. Yeah.
that sent me, that article sent me on this trip,
On
and
the
I don't
journey.
want to, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, on a journey. But it does come from a point of well, first of all, you are in a relationship where
Yeah.
love and care and connection, and so it isn't about, oh, we have one frame of bed or not, or
Mhm.
we can also live with two of them separately, also two
Indeed.
duvets or two things. And
Indeed.
it's
Yeah.
not that connects but we won't go, because this is not about relationship and couples.
Correct. And we did respond. So, in case people are interested in our opinions, we did share it in
We
that
did share
article.
it.
Yeah.
And another thing that came to mind
Mm-hmm.
was the fact that in the past, if you think about it, it was sun who was warming up most of the building or the houses, so then overnight, naturally, the fire would die off, because, well,
Correct.
nobody stays there to take care of it. And then the building materials were not as good as they are now to keep the
Indeed.
temperature. Therefore, the house naturally would lose temperature, and you would end up having a quite, well, I don't know, 16, 18 degrees naturally. Therefore, that
From the
supported the
outside
sleep.
temperature, basically. Yeah.
Right. And I also, this is something very connected to my Romanian experience and the history. The fact that even nowadays, if I visit my aunt who has a high ceiling house and a large space and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
for her, she doesn't put the temperature so much because it's difficult to warm up such a space. But
Indeed.
also visiting the grandmother in the country who still has a house which is built in the old times and all of those things,
Which means it's much colder, right?
it's much colder. But
Yeah.
then you would have like a duvet that is with sheep wool made, which is
Indeed.
quite heavy and very warm, and you would be in this cold space but be under a weight and
Correct.
warmth. And weight does something for your body. It's actually helping to induce sleep, because it feels like in a cocoon, or like in the womb
But
space.
it's similar to what we do with our babies, right? Or newborns in
Yes,
swaddling them, and
yes.
having that complete tightness feeling of almost repeating the feeling of being in the womb. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's, I wanted to mention this because it's still connected with temperature and with the fact that sometimes having a weight might help you actually also
Feel more
induce
safe and
sleep.
comfortable. Indeed.
Yes, it's,
Yeah,
safe and comfortable. Now,
definitely.
I realize we haven't mentioned caffeine and alcohol. We did discuss and touch upon
In
it in
previous.
other times. But what would you like to say here?
So one thing with caffeine that I would like to say is that it actually suppresses adenosine, and adenosine is related, or like a chemical that is related to sleep pressure. And from the moment that we wake up, we build up that sleep pressure. Um, so what happens if we drink caffeine? That sleep pressure is actually being brought down again. So you actually extend that window of feeling active, feeling alert, etc. Um, so it can be very helpful, when you want to be focused, when you want to feel more awake. But it is a bit of an artificial way to get there. Um,
It's like
so
running into a car
yeah,
where the meter from the gas is
it's
broken
going.
actually, and you're running and running, and you think you have the energy, but then at some point you stop because
Exactly.
you no longer have gas. So actually, you are cutting off that feedback.
Exactly. And one thing to be mindful of is, do you need caffeine to remain alert, remain awake? Those could be symptoms of you're not getting enough or good quality sleep. And another thing that I would like to mention is that, caffeine, we all know that it's in coffee, in some teas, but it's also in chocolate. It's also in some medications. So I would definitely recommend, to read that if you happen to have these medications, to when maybe to take it in, for example, or talk to your doctor about that. And another thing that is interesting is that women on their period process caffeine much slower than outside of the period. So that might also be something to think of when you have trouble sleeping or falling asleep or staying asleep. Are you on your period, and when did you have your last caffeinated drink? Yeah. One rule of thumb is to have your last one about 8 hours before you actually go to sleep. I myself stop after 9 or 10 in the morning, but just because I know that if I go beyond that, that I really notice the effects in the evening. Yeah,
I
and
don't
with
drink coffee at all, so
which
yeah.
is a good thing. But then again, in green tea, there's also some caffeine. So in case you might be drinking that, and then with alcohol, alcohol is um, it falls under a sedative, and meaning that you kind of get sedated, which also feels for a lot of people that it actually helps them with falling asleep. And that is indeed true, that um, it really helps to do that quicker, but it doesn't get you into that natural sleep initially, which means that you do not get as restorative sleep as you would want. You also have more fragmented sleep, multiple times waking up, also having the consequence of not feeling restored and and fit. And the thing is, a lot of people don't remember that they actually woke up multiple times, and it can then be a challenge to actually pinpoint that it could have been the alcohol being a factor on sleeping badly. But secondly, it also suppresses your REM sleep. And as we know from the last episode, that REM sleep is your dream sleep, the one where memories get consolidated, your emotional um, um, state is, being restored and, yeah, put back into how it should be.
Yes, well, I think yeah, these are the sleep stoppers that are presented in the book, and I think looking at the time, we have about 22 minutes left, as
Time
usual
flies by
in our
quickly. Yeah.
conversation. And then if we are to shift to the sleep disorders, and again, no medical advice here, but we look there are many. I think there are about 100 sleep
There's
disorders
over,
identified,
definitely.
but
Yeah.
we how did we decided to choose the ones
Well,
that
we
we want to
wanted to
focus?
look at the one of the most common one, which is insomnia. One that is also very known, which is sleep apnea. that um, quite a percentage also suffers from, but not everybody gets that checked out. And if sleep apnea is not treated, it can become a silent killer. So, just one moment. Can you hear my dog? I think so,
I
right?
can, but you're alive in a house that is alive, and it's
That's
absolutely
true.
okay.
Well, everybody knows I have a dog. Um, and we also wanted to mention parasomnias because those tend to have you show behavior which is just out of the ordinary when you fall asleep or during sleep, and some that yeah, might be recognized either by parents or family members within the house. So that's how we kind of came to these as such. So if we maybe start with insomnia being the most common one that people suffer from, and there it's good to actually make a distinction between sleep deprivation and insomnia itself, because with sleep deprivation, you you actually have a window um, or actually you have the urge to want to sleep, but you don't have sufficient window to be able to sleep. Whereas with insomnia, you have sufficient window to be able to sleep, but um, not sufficient or good enough the need to sleep. So those are two things that should be really considered as being different. And there are a couple of things that you need to tick clinically in order to be diagnosed for that. Is that you have at least 3 nights per week for 3 months that you are suffering from not sleeping enough or not good quality of sleep, and you feel it as being impaired by this in your daily functioning, and you also don't have any other disorders that could induce this. So it's really on its own as such. Yeah. So that's and interestingly enough, um, if you look at our habits, some of our habits actually seem to promote becoming insomniacs. If we look back at some of the sleep stoppers with the mobile phones, the social media, the being available, constantly alert, the fear of missing out. These are all things that actually do not really help to yeah, to get the best sleep that we possibly can. Yeah.
Right. So then with the insomnia, is there like, because you said what, like to keep it in our minds a little bit, how am I suffering from insomnia or am I actually deprived of sleep?
Yeah.
But even within insomnia, there are like, I think there's a difference there, right? So there is a difficulty of falling asleep, I think, and a
You
difficulty
have
of,
multiple things that people could be suffering from: a difficulty falling asleep, difficulty remaining asleep. So, for example, when you go to the toilet during the night, you go back to bed and you can't fall asleep then, and waking up too early to your liking. Yeah. So those are the three main um, things that insomniacs would be suffering from, and sometimes they could be suffering on multiple of these three, whereas other people might be having difficulties only with one of these. Yeah.
right. And maybe I want to mention this, that there might be a
Mhm.
belief that as we go through life and we get older, we actually should have less sleep.
Mhm.
And it's just normal. Yes, I'm an older person, it's normal to sleep 4 or 5 hours per
Mhm.
night. And actually, scientifically, that is incorrect. Yes, the sleep might reduce, but actually it is incorrect that you would require
Yeah.
and so little sleep, and it's normal. And why is it important to mention this?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes it is that our erroneous or incorrect beliefs that
Definitely. Yeah.
there isn't an awareness, this does not it's not okay, and actually
Indeed.
this is something that it should send you on an exploration to figure out
Mm-hmm.
what is the
Correct.
challenge.
But one such thought could be, I need my 8 hours of sleep. And, you know, if you sleep 8 hours and you are very energetic during the day, have yeah, um, no suffering from that whatsoever, that's fine. But pressuring yourself in thinking that you need that, rather than maybe figuring out if you need a different number of hours, maybe 7 or 7.5, it could really take off that pressure that we tend to build up on ourselves, and therefore making it even more difficult to have something as natural as sleep, and um, something that cannot be forced to be yeah, to be happening.
Right. So these were a couple of things I think that were also mentioned in the book with the insomnia, So
Mhm.
if you wake up in the middle of the night, so
Yeah,
first of all, take away all of the things that can tell you what time it is, because that is actually
definitely.
feeding into those
Becoming more
thoughts.
and more true.
Yeah, those thoughts and calculation. Here I go, I'm not sleeping, what is the time, when am I wake up? So which sends you on a mental trip and keeps you active in the wrong way. I
Correct.
think this is a sweet, even if you wake up and you say it doesn't matter, it is night, it is my time. I
Yeah.
think some loving thoughts, so these are just quick tips, some loving thoughts. It is, I am
Mhm.
here, I'm in my bed, I am protected,
Yeah,
and this is a gift for my body. And just having a loving, compassionate conversation with yourself
indeed.
into,
Yeah.
and staying very, very calm and positive, and maybe taking your mind into a place of peace and joy, because I'm certain in your lifetime you
Mhm.
have experienced at least one
Yeah,
time or one place in nature or in the past
yeah,
where you felt that could be a thing.
true.
And
But, but if I
yeah.
also may add something else, if you're noticing that you're in bed awake for, let's say, more than 20, 20, 30 minutes, and the thing is, you don't have to watch your clock to know that it's this duration. You kind of sense yourself what it is. Um, Go out of the bed, and go do something that relaxes you, that you can unwind by, to pass the time until you actually get sleepy again. Think of a meditation. Think of, indeed, doing something with your hands. Some people love to knit or to broider or color. Listening to some relaxing music. It might be that you don't feel as sleepy enough for that sleep cycle, and then the next sleep cycle can come around.
And remember not to turn off a lot of lights. Yes, so that's why I think it's
Exactly.
quite important to have lights, that a dimmer in the house.
Hmm.
I think it
Yeah.
helps also with the electricity bill, to be very honest. But it but it's quite important to have in a room, in a space, especially in a bedroom, but even the living room, to have multiple ways of lightening, which is also a source of lighting, that it is very, very soft, maybe warm light, and
Indeed.
something that you could
Not in
turn
your
on,
face. Yeah.
not in your face, something that is like this low level or on the ground
Basically,
level.
very, very dimmed light, because
Right.
indeed it's the light that can actually also generate or send a signal to your brain that it's day, and day meaning that you should wake up. So indeed, be mindful of how bright your lighting is, and towards the evening to start, 2 3 hours before, to really start dimming, gradually, to a point where you kind of have it similar to what a candle maybe would have. Yeah.
Right. So just be mindful of those things. It's
Yeah,
always good to have these lamps, like night lamps, put just gently in these spaces,
yeah,
and just sit in a space of kind of quietness, even if you can't fall
yeah,
asleep. Now, this is the insomnia, and I think one thing that we really wanted to discuss.
yeah.
Yes, I see 10 minutes to
Mm.
go. We wanted to touch upon a sleep apnea,
And
right? And because it is named the silent killer, right? Uh,
it
and
is
why is
indeed,
named the silent
well,
killer?
and it is indeed a silent killer when not treated. Actually, everybody that I speak to that either complains themselves about snoring or their partner snoring, I really ask them to, to have checked out if they are also not having these breathing stops or these how do you call it these reductions of air being breathed. Because what happens is in that moment there's less oxygen going to your brain, and especially with obstructive sleep apnea, because there's not sufficient oxygen going to your brain because you're basically stopping to breathe. um, your body thinks that you're choking or suffocating, and hence forcefully waking you up in order to make sure that you continue
Survive, pretty
uh,
much, because
really in order
it's a
for you to
survival
survive.
mechanism, right? So it's waking you
Survival,
up. Yeah.
correct. Survival mechanism. But can you imagine indeed having to wake up multiple times because of this happening? That people that indeed suffer from this feel so exhausted when waking up because you constantly are grasping for air um, in order to be surviving, kind of. But the thing is, most of the people do not remember waking up or grasping for air. It's usually, the person sleeping behind, not behind, next to him or her that experiences this. So if you indeed notice this with either with yourself or with your partner, to please have this checked out. If you look at the symptoms that you could be having from this: excessive daytime sleepiness, headaches in the morning, restless sleeps with periods of wakefulness every night, a dry mouth upon awakening because, of course, you're grasping for air, and reduced focus and concentration. So definitely things that impair your day.
And
Yep.
I also want to mention, because especially with you might be in bed 7 hours, and you
Hmm.
kind of say, I'm counting in and there's 7 hours, but look at me constantly. I am 7 hours in bed and still I
Yeah.
have a headache, and I'm waking up and I'm feeling like this and I'm feeling drowsy. Look, it's not that difficult to go and check. And I think for this to have it checked, you can just research, because there are like sleep centers that have
Yeah.
multiple specialists. I think, as far as I know, it is a specialty with the pneumologists. They are the
Hmm.
one doing this monitoring of a night time. There are different levels. You can have a one night, I think, over the night monitoring. It can be
Hmm.
at home, but it can be also in the laboratory, so they can check. And there's different levels.
And I
Um,
think there's also something that you can even bring home, and then they monitor you at
yes,
home
yeah,
with the apparatus. And there are ways to treat this. One of the most known ones is the CPAP machine, in which you breathe oxygen during the time that you sleep. And I know a couple of people that have that, and it has really improved the quality of their life. Yeah. So
exactly. So it isn't just in the oxygen, because obviously, slowly, what is happening? So there, you can't benefit of the NRM sleep, which is that sleep that is the profound sleep without dreams. in which all of the regeneration is happening, right? The regeneration of the cells, all of it, all of the good things,
Yep. Especially the
the
physical, your immune system,
all of the
uh,
organs that
your
need this.
cardiovascular. I mean, if you look at some of the risks that you're suffering from if this doesn't get treated, more car accidents due to drowsy driving. And I'm reading it because there's so many, and I only took like the top five. Um, the cardiovascular diseases like a high blood pressure, diabetes, heart failure, more chances of having a stroke. Um, Let me see, and hypertension, which is like a high blood pressure in the arteries of the lungs. So there's a lot of things that could be really increased risk wise if this does not get treated. Of course, if you happen to be diagnosed with that.
Right. And Michael Walker, who's actually, he is a doctor, the author of this book, he's saying
He's not
that
a doctor actually, because
he's
he
not,
happens. No, he's not a doctor. He's really a scientist.
he's a
Um,
scientist.
he's a
Yes.
scientist. Yeah,
So he is a doctor, but he's a doctor in science.
he's a
Yes.
doctor in science, not a
Yes.
medical doctor. That's the
Yeah, so
difference.
he's a researcher. But the
Indeed.
thing is, he said that it so happens that many times
Mm-hmm.
this, it does not get looked at, or it's that's
Indeed.
why it's called the silent killer, because
Yeah.
many times other parts are being looked at not this, the sleep apnea.
Indeed.
And this is an invitation. It's not difficult, it's not painful, it's just about it. Just it takes you, costs you some time and trouble, and then it can improve indeed a lot your life. Now, Cheryl, we probably are going to run a little bit over an hour, but let's give each other about 10 minutes to talk about the other bits,
Let,
just
let
touch upon it.
Let's indeed only still talk about parasomnia, because I already mentioned that that is a term for unusual behavior that happens during your sleep, just when you're falling asleep or when you're already sleeping. And one of the most known ones is somnambulism, or other word for sleepwalking, which we tend to see with kids or growing kids growing up, but it has to do with a disorder relating to movement. Bless you.
Thank you.
And this tends to happen in the non-REM phase, where you're deep asleep, but your your motorics are yeah, in such an automated state. Do they can walk, they can talk, etc. I myself actually have sleepwalked when I was younger. I still remember one or two of these episodes happening. I almost even when we stayed at friends of my parents, they happened to come back from work very late, and they found me in the living room, no, not in the living room, but at the front door, unlocking the door in order to get out of the house. And they managed to just be in time to get me from wandering the streets at night. Um, but it's very common that this happens, and also even adults tend to can experience this. But why it's more with children, they don't really quite know yet, but there's a great likelihood that it's because of a higher percentage of deep sleep, of non-REM sleep in that age phase happening, which then increases the statistical likelihood of this happening. Yeah, but other things are so sleep talking. Bedwetting is also one of them. Um, Grinding your teeth is also one of these sleep disorders that you have. So yeah, it's
I
just
think
that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think next to that, I wanted to mention from my two pennies from when I was a parent, what I've
Mm-hmm.
experienced with my son was the night terrors, which are not very very common.
Mm-hmm.
There are difference between the nightmares and night terrors, and I
Right.
think we might have touched upon them. But in the night terrors, the child is sound asleep, but it's with eyes open,
Yeah.
and
Very scary for parents to
it's
see.
very, very scary for parents.
Yeah.
When it's happening, it's not a nightmare. You talk to the child doesn't talk back, but
Right.
actually perceives you as being a force trying, and he's trying to move away from
Mm-hmm.
you. And the more comforting you're trying to do, that is being perceived in the sleep by the child as a restriction of movement. So actually,
Mm-hmm.
it's making it worse. So
Yeah.
then the recommendation was just make sure that the child
Mm-hmm.
remains safe, and make
Exactly.
sure that nothing harmful comes. And also with the night terrors, the child might be well, not wide awake, but with eyes open and screaming his lungs off, like he's in afraid or in pain, but you can't do anything. You can't
Yeah.
really
That's,
comfort him.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And it might be good to mention also the difference between a night terror and, for example, sleep paralysis, because a night terror, or actually with nightmares tend to happen in the REM stage, which is more towards the later phase of the night, early morning, whereas night terrors usually tend to be more in the early parts of the night. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're very correct. Yeah,
yeah,
somewhere around 1 or 2 in the night rather than more like 5 or 6. Indeed, that
exactly.
those were our experiences, but
Yeah.
happily they go away with the age development. So I
Yes,
think they
indeed.
they ran over a span of, I don't know, a year and a half. It
Yeah.
was just a stage, luckily. um yes,
Yeah.
and children can't remember anything that is happening during a night terror, but they can during a nightmare. So if they have a
They
nightmare,
tend to remember more after a nightmare. Correct. Yeah.
yes, then you can comfort them and you can help them, and they can tell you what happened. That is a nightmare,
Yeah.
and a night terror is just something that
Yeah.
I hope our listen don't get to experience, but if you do, just know it's still within, it's
Yeah.
happening, and it will go away.
Yeah. But also interesting to know that um, with the parasomnias, that there is something like an unexpected spike in your nervous system, and as we are um, almost starting to wake up, or your brain is starting to raise uh, awareness, um, it gets kind of stuck between the sleep state and the wakefulness state, and that's kind of also this this misalignment that kind of happens in there.
Right. Now, I know you had narcolepsy. Do you want to say anything about
Mm,
narcolepsy before we exit
uh,
today?
just that it's also a one disorder that people suffering from that really have difficulties um, having good quality of life, so to say, because um, if you have narcolepsy, one of the symptoms is a sudden loss of muscle control, and it can happen anytime, anywhere. Excessive sleepiness, just wanting to sleep or falling asleep at moments where you do not want it to happen. And another symptom that apparently happens if you are narcoleptic, if you've been diagnosed with that, is sleep paralysis, actually, which I've just mentioned as well. So if you, but funny enough, some people immediately then say, "Oh, I might have narcolepsy because I have such an excessive need to sleep." But you do need to have the other things ticked off as well in order to be diagnosed with that. Um, but yeah, if you are suffering from these, please talk to your doctor or with a specialist relating to this. And if you're suffering on a daily basis from yeah from this kind of sleep.
Right. So I think we kind of covered again a lot of
A lot
ground
of
in this.
information. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of ground in this hour. So we have talked about the sleep stoppers, right? So I think in the stoppers we mentioned about light, we mentioned
Mhm.
about regularized temperature, caffeine, alcohol, well, punching time cards, which is pretty much a change in behavior, and alarm clocks. And
Correct.
then we, under the sleep disorders, we mentioned insomnia and sleep apnea,
Yeah.
parasomnia, and those are kind of some of the things that you can talk. And of course, you can read more about it on in the Matthew Walker's book. It is quite interesting, and there is a value I find in understanding the biology or the neurology or the neuroscience for this process, because it is very empowering to knowing what is happening with your body, your
Yeah.
children's body, or maybe other people that you love, and what can be done about it. So, Cheryl, one thought before we leave?
Hmm. One thought. Don't snooze. No. I hope the information that we've given is, empowering, insightful, and I would really invite you to experiment and to try what works for you, whether it's regarding sleep duration, whether it's regarding the different stoppers that we talked about, temperature, the alarm clock. Um, see what works for you. Yeah, and for your family, of course.
And if you have any questions, as always, you can leave it here. You can reach out to Cheryl. Cheryl probably will leave her email address, in the comments. And thank you for being with us today. And we see
You.
you next time in June for the last part of this book. And yeah, before the summer. So thank you very much, Cheryl, for a very insightful
Indeed. And
conversation.
maybe we should take Vlad's question to June.
Yes, Vlad, do come back and ask us again. Hey, enjoy your weekend.
Have a lovely weekend. Take care.
Bye.